associative, right? So you would but solve the purpose of because I know what people use this idea.
Okay, so we're back. We got Victor wired up, and I think yeah, Victor works at Yahoo. He has like his whole team, his own team now, which I think wasn't the case when I started there when I worked there. But it's pretty awesome. They're all hard at work on making Yahoo pages very accessible. And Yahoo, that's one of the things Yahoo is actually quite good at. Many of the pages, the home page especially, it's all accessible. So what's the story about mobile? So Victor's here to answer that. And so I'll just let him take it away.
All right. Hey, everyone, and Travis and David and everyone, I'm very grateful that you decided to invite me, make part of this wonderful event, and it was great to listen to John. And so the very first thing you'll notice about me, I'm going to be tied to my computer. So normally I would probably like to do a little dance, but unfortunately with these wide headphones, I can't really do that. So I'll be slightly, tied to my computer, but hopefully that's not going to stop me from being funny, interactive. So one thing we'll have to do at the beginning, there's a bit of code, there's a bit of a sort of pattern we have to follow here. When I ask you a question, what do you guys do? Nod your heads, or what do you do?
Shout out.
Okay, you could do that. Okay, so one way is to figure out if I know that you're, if I don't hear any sound from the room, that means it's time to exit, right? So you got to make some sounds. Another thing we can do is if you clap. Clapping allows me to figure out, it's sort of sociological thing, because I can judge how many people, who's the loudest one. So 60% of the room agreed with whatever I said, right? 40%. Anyway, so this is another way. So feel free to respond in some way that I can hear you, because otherwise, I can't know what you think about what I'm saying. So anyways, I'm actually going to talk today less about Yahoo and more about mobile in general. It does affect Yahoo in some way because everyone is moving into mobile, including Yahoo, with all the apps and new platforms and browsers and all the things that we've learned from the web and things that we haven't learned from the web. So today what I'm going to talk about is mobile platforms, specifically iOS and Android. I'll try to be as impartial as I can, but me being a big fan of iOS, you may see a slight bias there.
I already told them why.
Yeah, okay, good. I like the iPhone, and I do like Android, but less than the iPhone. But anyway, it's irrelevant. As I said, anyway, so I work as accessibility program, senior accessibility program manager at Yahoo, and I'm a technical lead for the accessibility team. One of the people from my team is here, Todd Klutz. He's one of our rockstar engineers. If you want to see Todd's work, you got to check out the new Yahoo Mail. So those of you who use Gmail, today is the day to switch. So anyway, Todd's done a great job. There's lots of keyboard stuff in there. There's lots of ARIA. There's lots of everything. It's a great product. It's a good beginning for us, and I think it's a great example for where the web should go. Terry's another guy who's here. Terry doesn't work with the accessibility team full time, but he's sort of like he's working with us full time anyway. They always gets in discussions. They always discuss things about pattern and CSS and all this kind of stuff. So Terry's a good friend of the accessibility team. And we have two other folks that I'm just going to mention because they are all very critical in making accessibility happen at Yahoo. One is Ted Drake, who is our researcher. He does prototyping and research for our team, and he takes care of some of our videos that you will see today, actually. All of the videos that you'll see today have been touched by Ted, and so I'm grateful he helped me with those videos. And Nate Ibrahimon is the other guy who runs our social streams, our accessibility blog at accessibility.yahoo.com, our Twitter stream and Facebook stream, and so on and so forth. So check us out, and I'm going to come back to this later. But anyway, today I'm going to talk about the mobile platforms, and let's start. So what do I do at Yahoo? I already said that I'm a senior accessibility program manager, whatever. It's a pretty long title. In any case, what I really do at Yahoo is I try to screw around, troubleshoot, brainstorm, mostly around user experience. I mean, I do have a computer science background, but I love working on interactive patterns, figuring out what is the right things, especially because I myself am a screen reader user and I rely on keyboard a lot. I'm kind of impacted by some of this interactive design stuff. Okay, so there's like about 1 million definitions about what accessibility is, and so I'm not trying to add anything to what you already know. To me, it comes down to several things. One is the most important thing, which is I don't care how you do it, the right way, the wrong way, but user needs to be able to understand what you're giving them. And I probably would be sort of shot by many W3C activists if I said something like, if you need to build a text-only page, go build it. Now, I'm not encouraging people to do that, but I'm saying, to me personally, the user experience is like the very first thing that everyone should care about. If the user has functionally the same experience as everybody else, if you figure out how to make that silly plain text page enjoyable, good luck to you. You should go and work for Hollywood. You know what I mean? So that, to me, this is like the biggest thing about accessibility. There's obviously other things like semantic markup, doing the right thing. But first and foremost, the user needs to be able to understand your interface, needs to be able to interact with it, needs to be able to move through it in a gracious and an enjoyable way, whatever that takes. Let's just go next. Okay, so accessibility started long time ago. From what I remember, which is not that long ago, Windows 95, all these kind of things. And, things were pretty complicated back then, just as they are complicated now, but everything did start from the keyboard. Surprise, surprise. We've moved from pressing keys, shortcut keys, to mobile screens. Okay. And then now we're moving finally to touch screens. The reason I want to mention these two things, because the input, the way we input information has tremendous impact on the understanding of accessibility. What's accessible with a keyboard may not be accessible with a touch screen, and vice versa. Also, the way we design stuff is going to change depending what device you're designing for. And you will see, I'm going to be showing you some demos later on. Some of these things will become clear as we move on, but I wanted to stress this right away, that this shift from PC to mobile has amazing opportunities, but it also has amazing challenges as far as making content and interfaces accessible. So, keyboard, as I said, we've got tabbing from one link to another, or tabbing, arrowing from one element to another. We've got mouse gestures, we've got things like that. And then, on the touch screen, we've got things like drag and swiping and so on and so forth. So right there, we already have interesting things to talk about as far as accessibility is concerned. But where did it all start regarding the assistive technology on mobile? So those of you guys who may remember or heard about the history of assistive technology, started in the 80s with very basic speech synthesizers. Then when computers got introduced, we started worrying about keyboard access. How do you make something keyboard accessible for blind people? Then we moved into things like sticky keys. If you're unfamiliar with these terms, you can just do search or whatever. Sticky keys allow people who have dexterity problems to press more than one key at the same time. I mean, if you got only one finger and you got to press a shortcut key like Control, Option, Command, W, good luck doing this with one finger, right? Well, there are tools that help you do that. But on mobile OS, assistive technology started just like on the PC, which means some companies took initiative and they said, we're going to take assistive technology and build it into our products. Other companies said, we're going to build the minimum assistive technology and let others build the rest for us. And others said, we're not going to bother about assistive technology at all, right? So right there, you already have an interesting, specifically with iOS, we have a lot of built-in stuff. And I do want to say iOS because that means every iDevice in the universe has these things, which is pretty amazing. iPhones, iPads, iPod Touches, they do have all this stuff built in. So what do you have? You have a screen reader called VoiceOver. It's the program that talks very fast or very slow, depending on how you set it. You've got Zoom, which is the magnification. You've got black and white, which is great if you have color blindness, so you can change the contrast between the icons and the content. You've got mono audio. Anybody knows what mono audio may stand for? Any guesses? No? You know what mono is? Stereo? Okay. Mono audio basically allows someone who has hearing impairment and can only hear, let's say, in one ear, or one ear can hear better than the other. Apple allows you to redirect your stereo output into one headphone. And in the upcoming iOS 5, they have done some really cool things to make it even better. But I'm not sure how much I can talk about it because it's still a week. Although, actually, this was been official anyway. So you can change how much of each channel can go into your ear, which is really cool. Anyway, so let's move on. This is the picture of the, I hope there is a picture on the screen. Yes. It's the accessibility panel where you can see all of those tools. And again, it's in every iPhone and iDevice. Okay, so what do we have on Android OS? We've got some of the similar things. We've got TalkBack Screen Reader, different name, the idea the same. We've got the feature I personally really like. It's called Kickback, and it's a haptic. It's a feature that provides haptic feedback in response to the gestures that you perform on the touch screen. So, for example, if you touch an icon, you'll feel your hand is about to explode because this thing starts vibrating. Anyway, it's pretty nice. I think especially if you're a deafblind person, or if your hearing is not great, it's just one more way to reaffirm that you've actually performed an action. So I do think that Kickback is a great thing. Soundback is another feature that you have on Android, and that is basically a fancy name for sound notification. So every time you click on something, or every time you swipe left or right, or every time you move your trackball or whatever input device you may be using on the Android, you're going to hear some sound, and that's what Soundback is. There's also Digital Zoom, or so claims Android's website. I could not exactly find the setting. It could be one of the sort of system-wide settings, but there is a Digital Zoom somewhere. And this is your Android panel. Okay, so the accessibility for those two operating systems has been impacted quite a bit by the system themselves. And by that I mean that iOS, for example, was built around touch from the very beginning. In fact, some of the hackery that has been done to provide keyboard access to the iOS has been bolted on afterwards. And I think this was done primarily for users who didn't feel comfortable, specifically blind users who didn't feel comfortable with using touch screens initially. So Apple accessibility team built this keyboard access, which is only available when you start a screen reader. But in essence, iOS has been built around the touch screen. Early Android devices, anybody remembers those? Like, I don't even remember. The one that I remember is Nexus 1, but I don't think it was the earliest one, right? John, what's the earliest Android?
The G1.
G1, okay. Those early devices Android OS has been built around keyboard in general, and if you look through their APIs, it sort of affected the way their accessibility was built. And I'm going to talk about this later as we move on, but for now, just take this. There's a difference right there. So we've got Android, which was sort of started as a keyboard-driven interface, and then with touch screens sort of bolted on, and we have iOS, which is sort of the other way around. Started as a touch screen, and then they bolted on keyboard access. And so historically, so people don't think that Apple is that awesome. I mean, they had their problems too. It took them 3 iterations of the iPhone to get accessibility features in. But once they got those features in, they were great. So that's at least a good thing. So we have, starting from iOS 3.0, we've got all of these tools that I showed you earlier, screen reader, Zoom, and Android starting from 1.6. We had basic screen reader built in. We had haptic feedback. We had sound feedback and all those things. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how the access to touch screens actually works, or should I say, for now, to mobile devices. Since I'm talking about iOS and Android, I'm not going to talk about Symbian OS or anything like that, simply because we wouldn't have enough time. Suffice it to say that I'm going to start with iOS, and then we're going to go look to Android. And if you guys have questions about other mobile systems, I'll be happy to talk to you afterwards. iOS, we've got 2 ways of exploring the screen. One way is you simply drag your finger, or you do just what you would be doing normally with your finger, and then as you do that, the screen reader will respond. You have a screen reader turned on, and it's going to provide some spoken feedback, so you know what icons you're touching, what buttons you're pressing, and so on and so forth. That's what I called an exploration way, a spatial exploration, because with this way of using touchscreen, you actually learn the location of things on the screen. So for example, if you touch something in the top left corner, you will know that, okay, this button is located there. So this way, eventually you can map out in your head where things are. And so rather than going through the whole screen and like trying to feel your way around, you can actually start touching in the places where you know things are. So it takes a bit longer. Most beginners don't really get that level of interaction because I think people are a bit scared, and also it does take a bit of experimentation. Learning things, especially in, when you get to unfamiliar places, right? You know how that feels, right? Kind of feels stupid. Anyway, so that's how they. So, and there's another way of exploring the screen, which is using flicking. The word flicking is really funny because whenever I use my screen reader, it says licking. So don't lick your screen. Flicking is a way. Yeah, flicking is a way to navigate your screen. You'll see the video later by making these kind of gestures. So it's basically just kind of swipe. And so what you do, you start with the left top corner, and you start flicking basically sequentially. And as you do that, VoiceOver screen reader in this case is going to go through the object hierarchy and move you one by one. So for example, imagine you have an app that has 6 buttons in it, right? So you will be moving from one button to another. And then whatever happens to be under your finger, that's what VoiceOver is going to tell you. Or if there's something that's, hasn't been properly coded, VoiceOver isn't going to tell you. It won't be able to figure out what the button or the icon really is. But anyway, so the flicking is what many beginner users start with, and once they kind of get comfortable, okay, this is not really that scary after all. I can just, try exploring the screen just by dragging my finger. So that's the flicking way. Okay. Oops. Okay. So let's see. This is when I start getting a little bit nervous. When the time for the video.
It's the other one. The other wire.
Sorry?
It's the other wire.
Oh, it's the other wire.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. It's the other. Why don't you cut off the other? Yeah. Go on.
Heading level 2, iOS vs Android.
Okay.
Heading level 1. How does it work? Link. iPhone introduction video.
So let's see. Yeah, I'm gonna try to pull up. So in this video, basically what I'm gonna do, you guys will see the basic interaction on the iPhone, just to get an idea how the interaction works with the iOS. So let's.
Head. Link. iPhone introduction video. Press link. iPhone introduction. HTML content.
So there are several gestures that allow you to operate the iPhone. We're not going to get into all of those gestures today, but essentially you can move through the screen by flicking your finger left and right like this, and every time you move your finger, the icons will be read to you.
Page 1 of 5. Calendar. Finance. Fold. App Store. Social. 32 new. 55%.
So if you wanted to open a folder or open an app, you simply double tap on it and
App Store. Finance. Folder. App Store. App Store. Info. Heading.
so from here, if the buttons and icons are labeled correctly, you will hear the name of the icon or the name of the element that you're trying to interact with, as well as its type. So in this case, if I wanted to review these buttons at the bottom,
Updates. Button.
you notice how it says Updates button,
Search. Button.
Search button,
Top 25. Button.
Top 25. So the voiceover recognizes the name of the icon, and it also understands the type, that this is a button. So if I wanted to
Categories.
perform a
Button.
search,
Search. Button.
a double tap, and
Jawbone. Search field.
here it says Jawbone and it says search field, so the user knows that they're supposed to type in this field. Okay, so John briefly talked about the importance of labels, and also the label's obviously important for obvious reasons. If you go into the store, you wouldn't buy a nameless thing, right? You want to know what's on the label, how many colors it has, what kind of item you're trying to get. So think of it the same way when you program, right? So, and the fact that it's a search field or a button is just as important, because it's not enough just to hear the label of something, but it's important to know what the type of that object that you're trying to interact with is. So let's move on. Actually, okay.
Does the iPhone, like the iPad, have like the rotor?
Sorry?
Does the iPhone voiceover also do like the rotor?
Yeah, we'll get to that. So so the next thing would be what I wanted to show you guys. So there's interaction with native apps. It's not much different with the web, but it is different enough from a point of view that the way the user moves through the web page is slightly different, and the next video is going to show you that.
Press link. HTML content.
VoiceOver on the iPhone allows you to navigate between headings, links, and forefields and other HTML elements on the web page. The way you do this is by spinning the virtual wheel.
Headings. Links.
Once you chose the type of the element you want to browse by, then you can flick up and down to perform the actual navigation.
Home. Link. List start. Landmarks. Accessibility lab. Link. Media. Link. People. Link.
Notice that every time I move to an element, VoiceOver announces the type of this element. In this case, it will say
Technology. Link.
Technology link. Similarly, if I switch to headings
Headings.
and then flick down,
The sloppiest captions ever. Heading level 2. Link.
the
Landmark
sloppiest
start.
captions ever. This is your heading.
In case you missed it. CSUN. Twitter. And applications. Heading level 2. Link.
In case you missed it, and VoiceOver announced the heading and the level of the heading, in this case level 2, which is our H2 tag. Okay, so as you can see, in that respect, it's not different from what you would be doing on web pages, right? I mean, you still have to remember about your headings, you still have to remember about your links, because essentially it's the same screen reader. The input has changed, but the output is the same, or at least it should be the same. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about Android. So what happens on the Android, as far as the accessibility is concerned, is we've got, remember I talked about the keyboard kind of access that you have through Android APIs. They call it a D-pad, which sort of stands for directional pad, I guess. Early Android devices had either a trackball or you have to use an arrow keys to move around the interface. And that's what D-pad essentially is. So in order to make an app accessible in Android, it needs to be keyboard accessible. And that means that you have to sort of think of your app as if the user was navigating the app with arrow keys, meaning that you've got left, right, up, and down. And whenever you move from one container to another, the focus has to move between those widgets, and that's the responsibility of an engineer to make sure that this happens. We've got 3 ways that Android currently works. We've got the D-pad navigation, as I mentioned. We have we also have touchscreen navigation, which is the latest introduction in Android 2.2. It is not the same as you have in iOS, but what they have done, and unfortunately I didn't have time to make a video of that, but if you guys can imagine, you move across the screen as if you were using arrow keys. So if you wanted to move to the left, you'd be flicking left, to the right, up or down. Now, because a lot of developers these days build applications based on the touchscreen devices they have, because these days I think anything you get from providers, I think it's pretty much everything is touchscreen, right? Am I wrong with that? Or I don't think there are too many keyboard Android devices these days. But when you think about accessibility, you do have to think about it as if you were building for a keyboard-enabled Android device. And that makes it a little bit difficult for developers to remember. I do hope that a week from now, I think there's going to be an event. Google is putting on an event. And I do certainly hope this is going to be something they're going to announce, something big. But right now, what we have is what we have. Remember, when you build and you want to make accessible app on Android, in order to create a seamless navigation like you have on the iOS, you do have to build it as if it was a keyboard-enabled app. Okay, so about the web on Android. So here's the current situation. We don't have native support for accessibility in the web, in the browser. So if you wanted to use a browser on Android with a screen reader, you wouldn't hear anything. You would just hear clicks and things like that. Luckily, because it's an open source system, third parties jumped in and they built their own tools. You can find those tools. I put a URL here, and you can go there and see. But the best of them is called Mobile Accessibility by a company from Spain called Code Factory. And they've done a pretty good job, actually. They've built like their own browser around WebKit, and I mean, in my view, it's probably not as well integrated as Safari on iOS, but it is pretty good. You know, if someone wants to eat Android, or they don't have a choice, or for philosophical reasons, whatever it is, you know, they have pretty decent access to the web. Okay, so with all that said, what can possibly go wrong if we have accessibility built in and all of those things, right? Well, surprise, surprise, same things we had on the web, everything can go wrong, right? I can't stress enough, and John already talked about is labels. It just seems like people just can't get those damn labels sorted out, you know what I mean? We've got labels, unlabeled things all over the place. And it's just probably something we need to make a habit of. I can't really have any other suggestion. But anyway, regarding labels, so what can really go wrong? We've got labels. This is a pretty easy mistake to fix, but pretty commonly and quickly forgotten thing to do. We've got custom gestures. That is actually a very interesting problem to solve. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but just wanted to sort of oops. Give me a second. What's going on? Okay, here we go. So we've got custom widgets and views. What that means is, you know, you're not happy with your you're not happy with the button that they gave you, right? You know, these Google guys were sweating and Apple guys were sweating, and you come along and you're like, screw them, I don't like them. I like my buttons better, right? So you build your own button. What you forget is your own button is no longer something that the screen reader recognizes. So therefore, you need to sort of take care of that button. We also got poor semantic markup. It's amazing to see the mobile web rising from the ashes, and you'd think that people have learned something from the current web. No, we start doing the same thing all over again. Bad markup, divs all over the place, blah, 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 you know, things like that. So do remember that semantic markup still matters. It still matters. Maybe 100 years from now, it won't matter, but I don't know. Anyway, so okay, and here we go. Here we come to the video that's, I think, people must have seen it on the web by now, because I think we put it together, but I think it's still pretty effective, and I think you guys will enjoy seeing it again, if you haven't. So this is an example of the app that's been put by a well-known airline in the industry, and it just shows, it will show you, well, you'll see for yourself.
End of list. Link. Magic buttons from Southwest Airlines. Video. Press link.
So this is one of the native apps on the iPhone.
Safari.
In
Ready.
instance, we're looking at Southwest app, which should allow me to go and buy tickets or reserve my flight. So
Safari
why
busy.
not? So I'm going to just do a couple of flicks left and
Voiceover
right
muted.
to see what I can actually do with this app.
Button. 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 C. 2011 Southwest Airlines Co. All rights reserved.
Okay.
From the top.
Button. 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 Button.
Okay, guess no business for Southwest. Yeah, so this is just, you know, this is again no labels on buttons, and obviously, you know, you would know where to go from there. So okay, let's move on. Sorry guys, my focus keeps running away from me. Okay. So you got it. It's all on the slide. What do you want me to do? You just do what you gotta do, right? So what we do here is that we make sure we remember about labels. If you forget about labels, put it on your checklist. I mean, how many people here maintain checklists, like personal checklists, when you program? Are there many people on this? It's a pretty small number, actually. Right? You probably do want to remember about a couple of things, like please remember to turn on my computer before starting to write a program, right? Things like that. I'm just kidding. But you do got to, I mean, especially with regard to accessibility, the reason why I think you do need to keep some checklists is because you're never going to remember these things, because this is not something that's native to your everyday experience, right? I will remember about labels because, hell yeah, they affect my user experience, right? You're not going to remember about labels because they don't really affect how you use the computer or mobile phone. So, you know, keep the checklist at your desk or whatever you're working on, you know, just to make sure you don't forget, because again, it's so easy. For web use, as I said, use semantic markup. Map custom controls. Okay, here's where it gets a little bit interesting. How many people here actually are iOS developers? Nobody? Okay. So anybody recognizes things like UIKit? You know what UIKit is? So basically, the core of iOS interface and iOS widgetry is something called UIKit. This is where everything starts. So all of the widgets that compose iOS interface belong to UIKit. UI buttons, labels, you name it, sliders, tab bars, segmented controls. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff in there. So UIKit is like your starting point. This is where everything starts, right? And so Apple has done a pretty good job making sure that if you pick one of the UI controls from the standard library, it has all of this stuff built in. It knows that it's a button, it knows that it's a slider, it understands that if I'm swiping up and down on a slider, it needs to report the value, it understands the range of the slider, it knows everything about it. So you come along and you say, I like the slider, but I kind of like mine better. So you build your slider with background images and whatnot. So what you've lost now is that you've lost the free stuff that Apple gave you. And of course, Apple knows that you're creative people, and they don't want just to have you not use your own stuff. So therefore, we have Accessibility API that exists for you. Every time you create a new Xcode project, and for those who are not iOS developers, Xcode is the development environment in which you would be writing either Objective-C, or you may be using one of the third-party frameworks, but essentially this is where you will be generating native iPhone apps. Okay, so every time you create a new Xcode project, especially if it's a native one, a native app, you get accessibility API, accessibility headers right in your project. All you have to do is just go to frameworks, and right there it is. It's called accessibility headers. No, it's called UI accessibility, and under there you only just need 3 headers. So what you see here on this slide, I'm mentioning UI accessibility traits. UI accessibility traits allow you to take your custom control and turn it into an accessible control. So for example, you could simply say, take this control, attach the accessibility trait of UI accessible button, and the screen reader user will now perceive it as if it was a button. No visual change on the screen, nothing. Your control still looks the same. The user of a screen reader now thinks it's a button. There's a bit more work involved, and you created something like a swipe gesture. You can also override those, but you do need to now take care of 2 things. One, that you need to declare it properly, and 2, you need to make it behave as if it was a swipe control. We're going to talk about this later as well, but just wanted to let you know, those of you guys who are not iOS developers, that's what accessibility traits stand for. They also let you define things like what object is selected or unselected and things like that. Okay. Okay, we've got okay. Sorry. Okay, I briefly mentioned that, but I put it as a separate slide, a word about custom gestures. So the way screen readers usually work, and in fact accessibility clients in general, it's not just about screen readers, it's actually also screen magnifications. In the context of mobile platforms, it's usually run from the same API. But let's just say accessibility client. What normally happens when you enable something like VoiceOver in iOS, it takes over the interaction. So now that means, let's say you build a gesture that says, draw letter S to go to settings, or whatever it is, okay? So the operating system doesn't know anything about your gesture because you defined it in your own code, and there's no easy way to express for you this to the operating system unless there's direct mapping between your letter S and whatever the swipe is, right? Or whatever, whatever the normal gesture would be. So it is your responsibility to find the closest match and make sure that the user is able to access your custom gesture via gesture that the user already knows about. So you've seen me doing flicking on the phone, right? That will be one gesture. There are other gestures, like if you wanted to move from page to page, you would be moving with 3 fingers left and right. So if you created the custom paging control, you want to make sure that the user can operate your control by using the gestures they already know. So you can still keep your own behavior, but it needs to be able to respond to the gesture that operating system understands. So that's what basically mapping custom gesture means. Okay, there's a note about web views. How many people here develop mobile websites? Okay, cool. You guys use custom gestures anywhere, like swipes and things like that? Okay, cool. Unfortunately, right now, we don't have a good solution for that. So the only solution I can suggest at this point is to provide some kind of alternative way, for example, previous and next button to move between different, if it's a carousel, for example, if you wanted to move between from one panel to another. The problem is there is no way to declare swipe gesture through markup. So John talked about ARIA a little bit. I don't know, actually. I think you talked quite a bit about ARIA, but there's obviously always more to talk about ARIA than what John was able to squeeze in that hour. Even ARIA, as powerful as it is, does not allow you currently to specify, hey, this is a swipe gesture. So you can't do that. So right now, I don't think there's an easy solution. There could be workarounds. I don't think there's a generic solution that I could tell you about, but it could be workarounds depending on your particular situation. Just keep that in mind. Every time you define custom gestures like touches, swipes, or whatever else you may want to decide, you want to be careful because those aren't going to work with the voice over screen reader on iOS. It won't also work on Android. So I gave this, this is a screenshot of the Yahoo mobile homepage. It's not a super great example. I'd like to pick something better, but can you guys see the previous and next buttons? I don't know how good this image is, but no. Okay, too bad, it didn't come out. But anyway, so there's a carousel, and it basically allows you to move from one section to another by hitting the previous and next buttons, which are like at the bottom of the carousel. It's too bad it didn't come out. Oh well. You have good imagination, right? Anyway, so just keep in mind for now that the custom gestures don't really work on the web, so we want to be careful when using those. Okay, and so once again, the question is, why no custom gestures? The biggest reason why is because, like I said, VoiceOver in this case is going to take over the interaction, and one, you will have a problem declaring your custom gesture, and two, there will be no way for the user to access your gesture because none of the gestures that VoiceOver understands will map to your custom gesture. Okay, a couple of things I wanted to throw in here. If you wanted to provide a custom experience, I mean, there could be situations. Remember initially I said, for me personally, as long as you provide enjoyable and awesome user experience for blind users or whoever you're targeting, then you're in good hands, right? Sometimes it happens that you may not be able to provide with the same code base, the same great experience for everyone. Well, the cool thing about iOS in particular is that you can create these things called views. And starting from iOS 4, you can actually detect that VoiceOver is running. When you detect that, you can either load a different view for a blind user, which is maybe a bit more friendly, or whatever you want to do. Maybe this view will contain actually some other extra pieces of information that other person, the sighted person may not really take care. The sighted person may not even, care about. So whatever else you want to do, by detecting that VoiceOver is already running, you can actually do. You can customize the user experience to as far as you can, as far as you want to go with. One cool thing, some apps use it really well. Actually, there are some really cool accessible games in the App Store, and they've done this really well. And the feature I'm talking about is called accessibility notifications. So what you can do, you can send VoiceOver notifications behind the screen. So if you wanted to scare your users, you could you could send them something nasty. No, just kidding. But one way you could say, for example, menu has expanded or menu has collapsed. So you may want to say, VoiceOver users, please, blah, blah, blah. So you could send them some custom messages, like some sort of secret way of communicating with your user. And of course, these will be triggered if the VoiceOver is running. So this UI accessibility notification is responsible for that. It's a very simple function. It just takes one parameter, which is the message that you want to send, and that's it. So use those things. Let's put my headphones back on. Okay. Let's go next. Okay, so it's time to show off Android, right? So I think what we're going to do, so people don't think it's just OS that has problems. Android naturally, as a developing mobile OS, has its share of its own problems, and so I just wanted to show you how basically it's a pretty simple problem to solve, and if it's not solved, the kind of experience you can have is not necessarily what you want your users to have.
Link. End of list.
So in this case, all I really wanted to do is just to purchase an app from the Android App Store.
Link. All I want to do is to buy me an app.
Okay, so here we go.
Prep HTML content.
I'm using the latest version of the Android
Safari,
operating
ready.
system with TalkBack screen reader.
Voiceover muted.
I'll be navigating the screen using the built-in trackpad. Right now I'm on the All Applications icon, and I will try to purchase an app from the Android marketplace. So I'll just press on the trackball.
Accessibility preferences.
So that gets me into the list of the application. So let me find the Market app.
Market. Set the content filtering level to restrict applications that can be downloaded. More about content filtering.
So right now I'm going to activate the options menu.
Options. Search.
Search.
Alert search Android Market. Edit box. Search Android Market.
And I already searched here before, so I'm just going to pick one of my previous searches just to make it easier.
Code Factory. End of line. At spot. End searching. Accessible Music Player UK, US, $5.99 Code Factory.
So I'm going to pick up this app.
Market. Go home image button.
And I'll just try to explore the screen because I didn't get any alerts.
Phone calls. Read phone. OK button. Market. Subtotal tax total pay for this with select payment method not checked. Android Market accepts downloads can be returned for a full refund within 20. Select payment method button. Alert select payment. Add a credit card. OK. Cancel. Add a credit card.
Okay, so here I'm given a chance to add a credit card, so I'm just
OK
going to
button.
choose OK.
Add a credit card. OK button. Add a credit card. OK button clicked. Edit box. Alert loading. Alabama drop down list.
Okay, I'm going to explore the screen to see actually how you add a credit card.
Edit box. Edit box. YY. Edit box. Edit box. United States drop down list. Edit box.
So you can see a lot of the unlabeled text boxes,
Edit box. YY.
which makes it really difficult to know. So here I can guess I would be entering year.
Edit box.
This one I don't know what it's for.
Edit box.
Again,
United States drop down list.
this is where I choose a state.
Edit box. Edit box. YY. Edit box. Edit box. Edit box. YY. Edit box. Edit box. YY. Edit box. Edit box. YY. Edit box. Edit box.
It's me going crazy.
United States drop down list. Edit box.
I think I'm going to ask for some help here.
Yeah, so I mean, you can see obviously, and most users, like I think John alluded to that a little bit, that, obviously we live with that stuff every day. So we're sort of trying to understand the pattern, like when you hear YYMM, okay, it didn't really have a proper label, but I can already associate that probably what they mean is, year, month. But, when you've got 3 added boxes and you're not sure where the credit card goes or security, that's sort of not the kind of experience you want to have. So labels. Okay. So those of you, anybody here programming for Android? No? Okay, Some people do. Okay, good. So it is actually pretty simple. If you look under Android APIs, the property you need to be aware of is called Android:content description. And so when you create your XML layouts for your Android apps, that's the property you want to be concerned with. So you take image buttons, text fields, any widgets that you use, you just basically put a label. That's as simple as that. And that label is going to communicate to the screen reader, like talkback, the meaning of your control. As I mentioned before, you will have to treat your app as a keyboard app. So that means you have to make sure that when you touch the screen, the touches are translated into keyboard events, right? So when you move from one container to another, the keyboard focus has to pass, even if you're just using the touch screen. That is actually very critical. And there are some functions here, just to show off. But you can, if you look under Android API, you'll find all of that stuff. So they've provided a pretty, it's a fairly good API as long as you accepted that your app is a keyboard app, keyboard accessible app. Then everything else kind of falls into place. They've got a bunch of accessibility events, and so all of that, again, you can find under API. So the focus, I mentioned keyboard focus previously, just to give you an idea what happens with the focus, right? In iOS, our focus is what's under finger. That is what considered to be an accessible focus. For those of you who are interested, it's just a factoid, but there is a game called, and I forgot the name of it, unfortunately. It's a pretty popular game among blind people. What they figured out is that they could actually catch VoiceOver's focus from their app, and they could, like when you touch VoiceOver, when you do a single touch, it'll speak the item. But unfortunately, what happens then is that if you wanted, when the user places the finger on the screen, and the app wants something to happen, with VoiceOver on, you can't have that because the single touch is going to speak only. So the VoiceOver doesn't pass that gesture to the app. Now these guys who wrote the game, they wanted, when the user placed the finger, they wanted blind users to be able to use the game by simply placing the finger and dragging around. And so they figured out how to pass VoiceOver by basically tracking where VoiceOver focus was going, and they said, aha, so we got you at this place, so we're now going to do the pass-through gesture. And so to the user, it looks like they're basically interacting with the touch screen without VoiceOver's intervention. Anyway, so the reason I wanted to bring focus, that it's very important where your focus is on the screen, because that's what VoiceOver speaks. If you open something up and you put a new menu, or you drop down a panel and your focus doesn't go there, VoiceOver is going to stay silent. And it's the same on the Android. So the screen readers are very sensitive to focus. And as I mentioned before, specifically in Android, it's very important to remember that when you talk about focus, you're talking about keyboard focus, because remember, it's a D-pad based navigation that we have. Okay, so let's talk a bit about tools. One of the great things about both Android and iOS is that both operating systems give you tools already in them. So previously, what the user would have to do, or developer, or even right now, if you wanted to test on Windows, for example, if you wanted to test accessibility, you could probably pull up some of the inspector tools, maybe look at the code, or use something like Microsoft's Object Inspector or any other tool. But if you actually wanted to experience if you wanted to experience the interaction that the user of a screen reader has to go through when dealing with your product, you would probably end up downloading a screen reader or a screen magnifier, right? Well, Windows 7 kind of changed that. There's actually a great screen magnifier built into Windows 7, which is really, really awesome. And we now know that Windows 8 is going to have a built-in screen reader. Mac OS provides you with a built-in screen reader. You've got all the tools. And so Apple followed through on their promise, and they've done the same with iOS. So that means you actually have VoiceOver in every iPhone. So it's very easy to just turn it on, grab a cup of coffee or whiskey or whatever you like, and just go through your app. I mean, it's treated as fun. You know what I mean? For simple stuff, you don't have to be a whiz. For anything more complicated, we've got Twitter, we've got Facebook, we've got all kinds of social streams where you can reach out to users and say, hey, I've done the basic things I could do, but I'm just stuck. No whiskey can help me. I think I got drunk.
Whiskey can help everything.
What is that?
Whiskey can help everything.
Up to a point. Right? Maybe. Okay. Yeah,
Go
whiskey.
back to my place. We'll talk.
Okay, in John's case, I think so. Talk to John. Anyways, no. So do remember those tools exist. And so what I'm going to do the next two videos, I'm just going to show you how to enable those tools. And okay, let's start with VoiceOver first. And as you can imagine, it's pretty simple.
Enable voiceover home TRI. Press HTML content.
In this short
VoiceOver
video,
muted.
I'm going to show you how easy it is to enable VoiceOver on an iPhone or an iPad. First, go to Settings, then scroll down to General, scroll down to Accessibility, and then we're going to scroll down to the bottom where it comes to triple-click Home. We want to toggle VoiceOver, and you're all set. Now, if you want to turn on VoiceOver, just simply hit the Home button 3 times.
VoiceOver on. Settings. Home. Accessibility. Back button.
And when you're ready to turn it off, one more time, just 3 clicks.
VoiceOver off.
Okay, that's it. That's all you have to do. And the cool thing about it, there are a couple of, while I'm moving to Android, the great thing about triple click home feature is that if you want to show your app to someone, you have that option ready. You set it once, and then you come up to me or to John or whoever, or not some blind person, you say, hey, can you look at my app? What do you think about it? And you just triple click home, boom, VoiceOver is on. When they're done, triple click home again, and you're back in business. It's great. You've got the tool right in your device, so please use it. Okay, let's go next. Okay, so let's go to TalkBack. Okay. Here we go. This video to show you how to enable the built-in TalkBack screen reader on the Android OS.
Safari busy.
First, click
VoiceOver
on the
muted.
menu, then scroll to Settings, then scroll to Accessibility. In the dialog that comes up, make sure that the accessibility feature is checked. Once you checked it, scroll down to the TalkBack screen reader feature and click on the checkbox to enable it. Once you enable the TalkBack screen reader, you will be able to hear the spoken feedback as you navigate the Android OS interface. If you want to disable TalkBack screen reader, you will have to repeat the steps above by going into under Settings, Accessibility, and unchecking the TalkBack checkbox. Wasn't that easy? So you've got that Android. There may be a way to assign a shortcut keys to do that. I honestly, be honest with you, I wasn't able to find that, but I wouldn't be surprised that there's got to be some hack, because it's in open source. There's got to be some hack that you can just basically put it on your screen or maybe on your desktop and quickly toggle it on and off. But the cool thing is that it is built in, and you just use it. Let's go back here. There you go. I knew someone would do that. This is by the way I left it to the end of closer to the end of the presentation. Every time I put it at the beginning, people like, voiceover on. Okay. So just a summary, basically, what do you need to remember? Every control needs a label. Okay, maybe every is a little exaggeration, but life wouldn't be great without exaggerations. Yep. What do you want to say?
Every control needs a label.
Yeah, okay. Every control needs a label. Okay, good. That's what I thought I said, right? But then I just thought, like, maybe somebody said, well, not every control. I've got this control that does something.
It's the magic label.
Yeah,
it's the magic control.
Yeah, exactly.
History meet in the cafeteria.
Custom controls. Every time you hear custom, you gotta be thinking to yourself, oops, I really want to make sure everything is right. Custom, right? Important. Use semantic and structure markup for the web. Again, the same thing. Here's the cool thing I wanted. I wanted to tell you guys about web views. Both Android and iOS do a pretty good job at embeddable views, which means if your app is using web view and you have screen reader on, they will expose the same features to your app. So for example, if you take one of the apps like, I'm just thinking, something comes to my mind, like Wells Fargo app, I think was built using WebView. Everything works as if you're using mobile Safari. So that's kind of cool. All the headings and all the links, all the good work you have done, if you treat it as a web page and you do all the right things you would be doing on the web, and then you take this web view and you suck it into your native app, you're good to go. When Google guys, when their browser is going to become accessible, it's probably going to be exactly the same story. So the embeddable web views will become accessible right away. So whenever you deal with anything like HTML5, CSS, JavaScript in your app, you're probably using WebView, and therefore you should be thinking about structured and semantic markup. Of course, play and test with accessibility tools, as I mentioned. Android, again, remember labels, which is your Android content description. Keep your custom views focusable. Use Android APIs to subclass your custom controls. Semantic markup for web views. Same thing. Again, there's no differences pretty much, just the tools will be different, but the concepts remain the same, right? And there are a couple of links. If you didn't have enough links, I can either post it, I can send you email, or I don't know if this ever ends up on a slide share. Somehow I always feel bad about my presentation, so I never put them up. So this is your iOS accessibility programming guide. That thing is really well written. It's not just like even if you don't care about iOS, you want to read iOS programming guide. It's a very well thought out, very well conceptualized, and it just teaches you about about how APIs really should work. I mean, I do recommend for those of you who really care about like proper APIs and how to properly think about accessibility, this is the document you may want to read. Someone actually created a really cool link for this on Bitly. It's bit.ly/IA11ydev. It's a bit easier to remember than this long link here, but anyways. Okay. And the last thing is, of course, shameless plug. I'm from Yahoo, so you guys gotta check us out, accessibility.yahoo.com. It's our main blog. We have a code library to which both Todd and Terry, the two guys I mentioned before, and Ted contribute. It's our way of sharing things that we learn at Yahoo. So the way the library actually started is that we thought, when you file a bug in Bugzilla and third time or fifth time around you have to retype the same thing, you're saying to yourself, am I just like crazy or what? I thought I typed this like last week. So then we decided, why don't we just create a library of sort of repository where we can store all of these articles and snippets of code and put it out there so that people outside Yahoo could use it too, but most importantly, it's a place for us to reuse. So next time we file a bug, we just put a URL and we say, okay, we've done our work, now you gotta do yours. Go read and come back if you've got questions. We're on Twitter, at Yahoo Access, on Facebook, of course, Facebook/Yahoo Accessibility. And if you wanted to follow me personally, you know, my, for what it's worth, tweets, I'm at VICK08. That's not on the slide, so you'll have to rely on your memory. And that's all about Android OS and iOS. There's going to be lots of cool things coming out of iOS 5. I'm looking, and I didn't talk a lot about ARIA, simply because I just think ARIA deserves its own time. There wouldn't be enough time. But any questions? Finally, I can put down my headphones.
It's either for you or for John. Noticing your earlier attempt with the text box difficulty on an application, is it a simpler interaction to use select boxes or multiple choice kind of interaction?
Well, it depends for what, right? So if you do have multiple choice, then you certainly want to use select boxes.
Checkboxes, yeah.
If you do use text field, like for typing a single line entry or multi-line entry, then you pick appropriate tag. You know, for multi-line it would be text area. For single line it would be input or could be ARIA text box. But let's just say you'll be picking something that represents the text box.
So for that example, it was year and date. It seemed ridiculous that you would have to type in the year and date. But is that actually the opposite of your experience?
You mean for which example? The one on the credit card thing?
Yes, the credit card.
Yeah, it would be better if it was a drop-down box.
In that one, yeah, select. So the advantage of a select is that you'll be sure that the values that are being passed on will always be correct. For users with cognitive disabilities, it gives them a range to choose from, so that they can pick the year that they were born in instead of perhaps mistyping, mobility impairments,
exactly.
the same kind of thing. So
Yeah, so it's kind of a constraining the user to the point where you think they need to be. You don't want them to make mistakes just because, you know what I mean? Because then you have to build in validation, all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
So I was just going to say, so again, perceivable, operable, and understandable. And so if you ask yourself those three questions in terms of the various form inputs, is this perceivable, is it understandable, is it operable? And if you can answer yes to those, then you've made the right choice.
Is there any ARIA role for credit card information?
So in HTML5 you have this what is it?
Regex to check.
No, there's the extensible extensions.
Oh, data.
Yeah, there's
the microformats?
there's the data hyphen star
data,
pattern,
okay.
and there's discussion about extending that to ARIA as well.
But don't worry about it, because I think essentially you probably need to be worrying about just using the right labels and with the right fields, right? And whether it's a credit card or, and in HTML5 you do have things like numbers. You could say this field is a number, and then the browser will restrict the user from entering text. But again, because this field is still evolving, think about it twice before you sort of lock in your markup and say, okay, I think I'm done. Any questions from iOS guys or somebody who's actually doing a mobile development?
Yes, I have a small question. We have a real-time application that push real-time content. You would expect this application to notify via voiceover every time there is a new item. Let's say visually, a new item is like Twitter. A new item is added on the stack, basically. You would expect this to be notified by voice, the multimedia content or any way that
right.
or whatever.
I mean, this is a good point you're making. The problem is you don't want necessarily screen reader to read everything that's pushed out on the screen. Because, for example, if you take CSS animation as one of the things, when you're animating something, there may be a bunch of things happening on the screen. And I think it could be a little dangerous for a screen reader to read everything. Now, let me just give you a quick example without going too complex. Think of your status bar on iOS, right, where you have clock and you have Wi-Fi strength or it's 3G strength, right? Now imagine if that thing kept talking every single minute, right? Now I know I'm exaggerating this because you could probably say, well, it could just take the information from the app and not from the status bar. But this could be a similar example where just because something is streaming, just because something is changing, doesn't necessarily mean the screen reader needs to announce it. Having said that, there will be some improvements in iOS 5. Actually, there are some improvements in iOS 5 that will make it a bit easier, specifically support for ARIA Live regions. Really awesome. So if you're doing web stuff, this will be very useful. But other than that, you have to use the UI accessibility notifications, and or using the proper focus management, so that if you want the user to interact with some of your elements that popped up on the screen, you want to make sure that your focus is moving into that area, so that the screen reader will then notice the focus change and announce it to the user. Does it make sense?
And so just to follow up on what Victor was saying in the web environment, so I mean, I did a real quick high-level overview of ARIA. One of the things that we have in ARIA is something called ARIA Live Regions, and associated to the live regions is an alert, and there's 3 states of alert. One is basically no alert, then there's polite and assertive. So polite would be that at the end of all the other interactions, you would announce something that happened in that live region, whereas assertive would be announce it right away. So there is some level of granularity in terms of announcing that something has happened in a different region of again, think about that topography, the landmarks and all that. So you've got a div where something's happening here, and yet you're interacting elsewhere on the page. You can convey that information using ARIA Live region. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. Anybody else? We're done.
Any other questions? Okay, awesome. Oh wait, what?
Well, thank you so much.
I'm sorry. Well, you're gonna ask
one
him
more
after,
question.
actually. Go ahead.
Okay.
But yeah, we'll wrap it up. We're gone kind of late, but we'll be here a little bit after. We have some pizza left over too. Well, thank you so much for coming, everyone. Thank you, Victor and John. Very informative. Very good information. We're happy to have you guys out, and thank you for those who made it. And we were looking to have these about like once a month or so, just like general tech talks. So keep an eye out for that, and we'll just announce it. So we'd love to have you here, and if you can't make it, we'll live stream it. So we're very happy to have all of you here. So thank you for coming.
Yeah, thanks for organizing this. I think this is wonderful. Thank you guys.
Yeah, nice to have you.
About the conformity. It should not be right.
I didn't know actually the browser in Android wasn't accessible yet.
Yeah, I know.
That's too bad.
I have a hunch that the announcement that they're going to make next week, I think, is going to have. That's just my hunch. I have no information or anything. Right, it's about time, and they've been pretty silent for some time. So I think there's a bit of suspicion that. So and they know that that's their problem. So it's not like it's not like they're like ignoring. So.
They have a whole team behind it too, so they got to be doing something.
Yeah, exactly.
They were scheduled to speak, but they actually backed out the last minute. So
I think
probably because of that. So I hope
yeah, one day it could be because of the upcoming release, right?
Oh, sure. But that would be cool to see. See.
I think you may want to invite next time like TV Raman separately.
Yeah.
Somebody else, because again, I was trying to, the way right now, the way things are, iOS is the best.
You cannot upgrade in the DOM.
It doesn't mean that this one
VoiceOver is awesome. Even I've gotten used to like navigating and using it like it's very user friendly, very easy to.
Thanks for setting this up.
Yeah,
it was good. And that was an awesome presentation, Victor. My mother is visually impaired, and I never knew that all these tools were available. Like that's awesome.
We're lucky these days. Because we're really lucky these days compared to what it was 10 years ago. iPhone is so simple. Using that. I don't know if you're still not using it. I think you should see if you could get it like.
See, I didn't even think those possibilities were available. That's awesome.